Welcome to the HR Empowerment Podcast, where we will uncover strategies and new insights from HR professionals who discuss up-to-date regulations, best practices, and the most pressing topics like diversity and equity, leadership, dealing with difficult situations, and much more that affect your bottom line and business. Thanks for joining us.
Welcome to episode 4, Emerging Virtual Technologies for the Hybrid Work World. This is Dr. Deborah Dupree, the Mindset Doc. Last time we just talked about the different mindsets, the different emerging needs, the different expectations that employees have, the emerging C-level suite of occupations that to open up, to think broader, beyond our traditional ways of doing business. Well, today we're going to take a closer look at some of the technologies that help us get there. Again, the shifting work world is upon us and continues to change. We were thrust into this a couple of years ago, and now we're adapting, but there's still change to come around. You know, we talk about the new normal because going back to the old normal is not going to happen. We've seen too much change and too many opportunities to go back to the traditional brick and mortar and the traditional work schedule. Today, we often say we leapfrogged forward in 1 year, which would have otherwise probably taken us 10 years to get to. And like it or not, the remote world, the new world of hybrid, whatever that looks like, is here to stay. But just what does that look like? Well, quite honestly, for many years, organizations have had remote workers. However, pre-COVID, that was only about 2% of the workforce. And then with COVID, remote work became the norm out of necessity. And yet it's not without its downsides. We've seen a surge in mental health issues, stress and anxiety from the uncertainty and unpredictability of what was happening, that we need to reimagine and rethink this whole idea of remote and hybrid work, because it does produce a sense of isolation and disengagement and feeling forgotten. So for today's leaders, we need to be particularly mindful about our employees who are not on site every day. Again, we know from past practice in the last couple of years that employees have actually been extremely productive, even more productive, to get the work done as long as their technology is good and strong. It's when technology is not up to snuff that employees get frustrated, disenchanted, and perhaps start looking for other work opportunities for companies who really do invest in how they work, where they work, and when they work. Many people do long for a return to the in-person, on-site workspace, while others are convinced that staying remote is the way to go, their new way of life. Couldn't be happier. And so with these differing mindsets, today's leaders in organizations are truly challenged. How do we maintain and foster a healthy workplace culture? How do we keep people connected to the organizational mission, values, and purpose? How do we create opportunities for inclusion and collaboration? And probably most importantly, how do we retain employees? We've seen the vast droves of employees leaving organizations. Again, oftentimes coined as the Great Resignation. And yet I will share with you, I love this post from Arianna Huffington, who recoined or reframed the Great Resignation into the Great Reevaluation. The Great Reevaluation of life, work-life balance, enabling employees to better deal with family concerns. And not only has it been a great reevaluation, but during this time, employees swapped positions, found new ones. We also saw a huge job growth in 2022. For over half the population, about 56%, saw work prospects increase during the second year of COVID. Who would have ever thought? We've seen the stock market go up and down, in response to different situations. We've seen COVID, surge and recede, and then the variants that have come upon us, really creating a state of uncertainty. And so it's interesting to reflect that not only have we seen historically significant job growth and the emergence of new jobs at every level. I talked about the expanding C-suite in our last episode. We also experience a surge of new technologies. How do we grapple with people working at home? How do we grapple with connecting people at home with people on site? How do we grapple with people who are working part-time on site and part-time from home, the hybrid world? And so it's really commanded that we think differently about how we work. And how do we push technology to better serve our needs? One of the things that we're seeing, one, to maintain social distancing and safe work environments without overdoing the human footprint in the workplace, is that organizations are looking at staggered schedules. And what this means is that, yes, some people are working remote, some people are working on site, but they alternate their schedules to minimize the imprint of too many people on site at one time. Some organizations are giving flexibility in terms of which days they come on site and which days they don't, but requiring that all employees are available during a certain time frame so that meetings can be conducted, in-person visits can be performed, and then meeting the core customer needs wherever they are. Because after all, even our customer base has grown globally. And so sometimes, like if we're on the West Coast, we need to deal with people on the East Coast, or, if we're working in Hong Kong or India, for example, then we're in totally different time frames, and we need to adjust our work schedules accordingly. And yet it's important to recognize that we, as a human need, it is important to feel seen, heard, and to socialize. And that will forever be true for the vast majority of the population. Some people have a natural tendency for greater socialization, the need to be part of something, the need to have, in-person contact, while others naturally prefer to work alone or in small groups. This natural human tendency and recognition of these differences is part of the new definition of diversity, going beyond the usual notions of race, ethnicity, gender, age, disability, and so on. Some thrive on the structure of the workplace with a defined work schedule, while others love the flexibility offered through remote and hybrid work, where they can better balance work and life needs. Really, each marching to a different drummer, but still committed to doing their work. Employers who embrace an expanded and flexible mindset for how to meet the needs of their employees go a long way in staving off the Great Resignation, while also expanding options and benefits. Rethinking, reimagining how we engage at work embraces the rapidly changing technology in the context of revisiting the floor plan of our workspace. So let me give you a few examples of how emerging technologies and rethinking our floor plan come into play. For example, instead of the long conference table where everybody sits around, and then oftentimes with a screen and camera at one end of the conference table, the trend is now moving towards smaller, movable, modular tables for small clusters of employees to sit with safe distancing. And then these table layouts are now stretched across the length of the conference room to face the side wall, where we now have several digital displays on the wall. These digital displays may range anywhere from including those who are working remotely, or even in other parts of the organization where distance and travel may not be conducive to good time use. And digital collaboration whiteboards have also emerged in ways that people can real-time, concurrently, collaboratively engage in conversation, exploration, and visual presentation of ideas. Now we're seeing things never to the legs. Forget the white pad of paper on an easel stand. We have real-time digital ways of communicating and presenting information never to be had before. And not only do these multiple digital displays on the wall serve to engage and include people from all sites, there's actually technology that affords the opportunity for those in-person and on-site to be mutually displayed, further reducing that notion of on-site, remote, the us against them kind of mentality that has quite often been fostered in past work situations when some people are remote and others are on-site. There's an attitude that creeps in and clouds our attitude and biases. Now, one other key tool that has gained rapid popularity is what's called the Meeting Owl. It has a 360-degree camera, microphone, and speakers that track both the visual and audio cues to focus on who is speaking. And so that way, whomever is speaking then shows up on the screen as the key vocal point. Now, what happens, though, is that it becomes even more important when we're using this kind of technology that we learn not to interrupt and talk over one another. So that's another thing about meeting management that becomes important. The Meeting Owl also provides an opportunity to split the screen up to 3 times to project not only the speaker, but also provide a panoramic view of all the participants, regardless of their location. This is definitely technology to look into to see if it fits within your needs. Again, it's also important, critically, to look at how your rooms are set up. I certainly have mediated many a situation of where employees, particularly in public agencies, have been back on site for quite some time. They're all sitting around the table with their mask on, and then the video camera and display is at the end of the conference table. It makes my ability to see, hear, and understand what people are saying because of the close proximity of the setup of their work environment. And so thinking about how to set up differently becomes critically important. These kinds of new technologies have evolved to meet the current needs of today's workplace and today's increasingly mobile workforce. I mean, think about it. Think about how much we use our smartphones to do almost anything. That never would have been the case, 5-10 years ago. And so we're at a different place, too, in the workplace. Now that we've been forced to go remote, and now we're gradually coming back onto the work site, is to rethink how and when and where people access their work and collaborate to meet as a team, as part of the culture of the organization. There's greater immersion and inclusion across the board with these new technologies, improved connection and communication, and preservation of social engagement. It's just different. It's not the same as before. It's going beyond the confines of what has been to what can be and will be. It does require an expanded mindset for thinking outside the box. Another one of the more recent trends is to include interactive digital displays in the break room. Again, to preserve the proverbial water cooler chat that employees have long enjoyed. And so that employees working remote can still connect with employees on site and vice versa for these more informal, conversational, non-work related social exchanges that are part and parcel of the human work experience. And so stop and think, how might you reimagine rethink your workplace, to embrace, to include some of these newer technologies. They're out there. It's a matter of looking for it and understanding how it might be used. Again, I am amazed at the creativity and the drive to make improvements. The technology fields have certainly been challenged and have risen to the challenge in coming up with new ideas to meet these new norms of how we work. So what new ideas do you have for how to bring technology to the workplace in ways that are engaging and responsive to today's changing ways of doing work? Bringing technology to better engage people, facilitate their collaboration with one another, and expand their ways of thinking to be even more creative, dynamic, and productive in how they work. Well, again, thank you. This is Dr. Deborah Dupree, the Mindset Doc. Coming up next, how to bring it all together. An action plan for moving the work world forward. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for joining the HR Empowerment Podcast, brought to you by Aurora Training Advantage. We hope you've gained new insight and strategies to navigate the HR profession. We look forward to you joining us again on the HR Empowerment Podcast.